All right, guys. This next man is a friend of mine. I really appreciate him jumping on. He's had basically, I don't know how he's done this. We're going to talk about it in a second, but he's done show to show to show to show where not only does he do stuff behind the scenes and makes sure all sorts of stuff happens, but he also commentates and he's a part of the weigh-ins and all sorts of stuff. The one and only Dan Hardy joins me after a pretty crazy back-to-back week with the PFL. Dan, how you feeling right now, my friend? How you feeling?
I'm a little exhausted, I'll be honest. I'm on about an hour's sleep since Paul Hughes finished his fight. So yeah, I'm ready for a good sleep. But I'm buzzing. We've had so many good fights over the last few weeks. You know, I've been in Florida for 5 weeks for the World Tournament. You know, the opening rounds, we had like, I don't know, 66% finishing ratio. It was amazing, the fights were. And then this last weekend in Belfast with Paul Hughes, I mean, it was just a special night. It really was. You know, it was a completely sold out arena. We had a good card, but it just kind of built to Paul Hughes walking out, and he owned the place.
Yeah, man. 42 seconds, right? 42 seconds it took the man to get it done. And what was your reaction when you saw the way he was able to do it? Were you surprised to see he got it done so quickly?
Absolutely, I was. I thought it was going to be a real back and forth. I actually expected Bruno Miranda to probably win the first round, and Paul to have to be, you know, tight with his defense and just kind of pressure when he could without taking too many risks. It was very surprising to see him move as fast as he did. And honestly, the thing that stood out all the way through the week was his absolute self-belief. Like, you just don't see that very often. It's very, very unusual to have a fighter just completely 100% believe in themselves. Like, you know, I mean, I interview all the fighters pretty much, you know, at some point during fight week. And everyone's got that just little bit of doubt somewhere in them. There's the anxiety or the, you know, questioning, or did I do enough, or whatever it is. Paul Hughes just had not even considered the fact that he might be beatable last night. And I mean, he obviously proved to be devastatingly effective.
Now he wants to go again with Usman, right? Usman Nurmagomedov. That's the big call out. What do you think, man? Do you think that's a possibility for him next?
I mean, I think it's the only fight to make, really. I think Usman, you know, I think Usman knows that that's the fight the fans want to see. Paul obviously knows it as well, and you know, the fact that he came back to Belfast and he fought in front of his hometown crowd, and you know, just proved himself again as world class. I think, you know, that's him doing exactly what he needs to do to get back in the cage with Usman. And the reality is, you know, I think the next fight would be a much tougher fight for both of them. You know, Paul knows Usman now. He knows what to expect, how he moves. But I also think Usman underestimated Paul tremendously, and I think that he's going to come to you know, the best version of himself. So I expect him to have an absolute war next time around, and I'm hoping that fight you know, happens later this year.
You know what I love about this? Obviously, PFL, it's got a rich history with a bunch of fighters coming in and out, and you know, the Bellator now is a part of it. But I feel like, do you kind of feel like Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov, it's kind of becoming one of those iconic rivalries, like the new iconic rivalry for the PFL? Like, it's almost like, if this happens again, who knows? Maybe we even get a third one. Like, it's becoming one of those battles that we're going to talk about down the track. Like a lot of the battles, you know, like McGregor and Nate Diaz, or some of the battles we had in the UFC. It's kind of starting to get into that area for me.
Yeah, it definitely is. You know, especially if Paul wins the next fight, because you know, then we'd have to be doing the rematch, and I would imagine that every fight that they had would be close. You know, debated and argued, and you know, controversial things happen. You know, was the knee illegal? Was it a clash of heads, etc.? You know, these things all happen in MMA, so it just adds to the narrative. And there was a lot of tension during fight week, especially at the weigh-ins. You know, I mean, Paul again was just so confident all the way through, as he was against AJ McKee. It was very, very unusual. I mean, I can't overstate it really. And I think that was something else that kind of got under under Usman's skin. I think he expected Paul to be more intimidated and more kind of humbly respectful of him. And not that Paul was in any way disrespectful, but he was just absolutely, we are on a level, and I'm going to show you that I'm more prepared than you this time around. And I thought he had a tremendous performance, but I also think that, they're both going to level up before they meet each other again.
Dude, so many great shows, by the way. Like you've been killing it. Any other favorite moments that stand out to you over the last few shows?
Well, I mean, we've had a few really good ones. I think we've had a couple of really big stars, emerge.
Phil Davis had a big win.
Yeah. I mean, well, what was nice is we had a bit of both, right? I mean, Phil Davis represents the old school. You got Phil Davis, you got Liz Carmouche, you got Brent Primus. All got wins in the first round of the tournament. But then you had Thad Jean getting upset. You got Dalton Roster coming through, who looks like like this is his year. And then, other fighters like Simeon Powell get back on a winning track, looking really strong. Fabian Edwards looking dangerous against, Impa Kasanganay. I think we had loads of really good performances. I'm a little biased because for me, the Belfast card was just, it was different because the atmosphere in there. And obviously we had Lewis McGrillen on there, who I'm sure you've been following for a little while now. He's an absolute animal, and he had a really, really good fight. Showed us his submission game as well. He took the back of Alan Philpott and got him submitted. So that was a really good night last night as well.
So how do you do it, man? Like, obviously sometimes you go show by show by show, which is awesome for MMA fans. What people don't realize is when you're doing the job that you're doing, which is all sorts of work, but one of the key ones is obviously the broadcasting. That means you're researching every single fighter for every single card. And because PFL has a lot of up-and-coming fighters, unlike the UFC, and even in the UFC and the prelims and stuff, it's hard to get footage. It's hard to get information. It's hard to get, you know what I mean? Like, because you have to tell the story for everyone. Hard enough to do one every month. You do back to back to back. So you're just sitting there, just researching fighters, getting to know fighters. Like, how do you do it? Because it was so smooth, man. You do such a good job.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, it is just research. It's just watching fights. And, I'm a bit better these days with keeping digital notes. When I first started commentating with the UFC, I like everything to be handwritten. It's a good way of me remembering things. And I still do, I still do write things down. I still do write a lot of notes down. But I also, especially with the PFL format, I do a keys to victory. So that now has kind of become my foundation for my research for the card. So I'll just have lists of keys to victory for each one of the events. And then I'll fill out, the information with, honestly, as little as I can that will just prompt my memory to think of a particular fight or an exchange or something. And, the good thing is we've had some returning fighters in the World Tournament, and I know a lot of the European fighters already, partly because I've signed them and partly because, some of them are returning for second or, third years with the PFL. So, it's all kind of floating around in there somewhere. The one good thing is that I tend not to have any notes now cage side. I tend to just kind of sit there and watch the fight and kind of work with what I'm seeing, and then let my memory just, give me whatever is relevant in the moment that comes to mind.
God damn, man. You're like one of those actors on stage down at the West End or something that does like a 2-hour play just off the top of their head. So impressive, dude. You're doing an amazing job. It's almost like going through a boot camp for you personally, right? Like it's almost like you've leveled yourself up by doing this process. It's incredible, man. Congratulations. And speaking of Nurmagomedovs, man, I got to quickly get your thoughts on UFC 315 as well, because it looks like one of Khabib Nurmagomedov's proteges, Islam Makhachev, is now going to be fighting for the welterweight belt. I know you've been flying around. You might have not had a complete opportunity to watch the fight, but what's your reaction to the fact that Australia's own JDM took out Belal Muhammad, and not a Belal Muhammad that was like, wasn't pushing the whole time. Like Belal was coming from this whole fight, and JDM was able to push back. He had a beautiful strategy and game plan that he was able to implement, and he improved himself. Like you couldn't compare him to the JDM that fought Gilbert Burns. What was your reaction when you saw he was able to do it, man, and bring another belt back to Australia?
I was so impressed. I mean, we've discussed Della Maddalena before. I'm a big fan of his boxing, and I like you said, he looked like he'd leveled up. I mean, his takedown defense was near impenetrable. I thought his footwork was very, very good as well. Not that it isn't always, but I think it was way more prepared for Belal than I expected it to be. I thought he'd come in as a tough, durable, conditioned version of himself, whereas he actually was very, very tailored towards what he expected from Belal. I thought he looked really good. Great head movement inside the pocket as well, very comfortable. Even when Belal had him backed up against the fence, where most people start to get a little panicky, he showed a lot of composure, being able to slip and counter and use his footwork to get off the fence. I thought he was very, very impressive. It would be awesome to see Makhachev move up and fight him. I did see that Makhachev said he's not gonna relinquish his lightweight belt. So I don't know how that's going to fly with the UFC, because I think they're putting a stop on double champs now, aren't they? But it would be a fight I would love to see. That's probably one of the best super fights you could make right now, aside from obviously John Jones against Tom Aspinall, which is the blockbuster. I think Della Maddalena's got a bright future. I don't know whether he's going to hold the belt or he's going to lose it to another one of the top contenders and then pick it back up again. I don't think he's going to lose it to Makhachev, though. I think Makhachev holds the lightweight belt against anybody in the world, on any day, including Ilia Topuria. I don't think if he moved up, he would have much success against Makhachev. But Della Maddalena looked very, very sharp against Belal. And I wonder what Makhachev would look like as a welterweight, whether he would look as strong and as lean, or whether he would look heavier and, potentially gas himself out, because he'd be stepping straight into a 5-round fight, wouldn't he?
It's interesting that you say that, because JDM beat Belal to become the champion, and for me that performance now brings interest into a fight with Islam. Like before this, I would be like, I think Islam would beat JDM, just going off the Gilbert Burns fight. But after the fact that he was able to stop all Belal's takedowns and look so good against him, it's almost like Belal isn't Islam, but what JDM was able to do against Belal, right, shows us what he might be able to do against Islam. Why do you feel that he beats Islam?
I just wonder what Makhachev would look like as a welterweight. It is a big step up from one weight class to another, and he is big for this weight class. But I also, McGregor's a good example of when you kind of shift through gears in weight classes. It changes the way that you move, right? And it also changes your kind of tone and your attitude. McGregor as a featherweight was like feral and lean on the scales, but by the time he got to welterweight, he was like rubbing his belly and laughing, and it was a different kind of energy. And I'm not saying that would be Makhachev, of course, but just sometimes the discipline that he would have to get him down to 155 and the extra conditioning he would do is partly what makes him so formidable. And I wonder if moving up to welterweight and giving himself that extra 15 pounds to kind of, just be, he's going to gain some muscle mass, or even some additional weight that he may not necessarily need and might actually impede him in a 5-round fight, especially. Because, like you said, Della Maddalena, he showed some weaknesses in the Gilbert Burns fight. He showed some big improvements in the Belal fight. You've got to think that trajectory is going to continue on, and he's going to be better again the next time around. And obviously now with the confidence that he's the champion, people can expedite their progress very, very quickly, and a lot of people will be coming to help him out. So I'm interested to see where he goes from here. But I certainly think there's some other fights in the welterweight division as well that'll be really interesting for him. And I know that Ian Gary's calling for it, so that'll be quite a fun one to watch as well.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. And if you want to support the show, please jump on manscaped.com right now and use the code word submission. You get 15% off and free shipping. And I want to talk to you guys about a very special product called the Chairman Pro. The Chairman Pro is the perfect Father's Day gift for those in America, or just any gift, or a gift for yourself here in Australia or New Zealand. For a person who deserves to look and feel his best, this just isn't any razor. The Chairman Pro is a high-tech, data-approved grooming update. It's an electric face shaver that can tackle up to 5 days of growth features 2 interchangeable blade heads. And whether you're cleaning up for golf dinner or just another accidental nap on the recliner, make sure you do it with style with the Chairman Pro. Of course, I mentioned the interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, but what about the fact that it's got the Flex Adjust technology? It's waterproof. The battery life is awesome with 75 minutes of runtime, and it has a display to tell you when you're running low on a charge. Of course, it comes with the USB-C cable, and it has wireless compatibility too. Travel lock, don't think that you've got a vibrator in your bag as you travel. LED spotlight to make sure that you can sort it out in the dark. And a 2-year warranty from MANSCAPED that has you sorted, giving you peace of mind with every use. I love the Chairman Pro. It is the electric shaver for everybody up there that could tackle 5 days of growth, and of course features the kind of charging capability, the kind of waterproof capability, the kind of display capability with its LED light that you need. Manscaped has you sorted. Jump on manscaped.com right now, 15% off with a code word submission and free shipping. And if you are watching this video as well, I've noticed a lot of people who watch these videos are not subscribers. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to the videos that you watch. It really helps me out a lot. If you listen on Libsyn, on Spotify, on any other device, please leave a review and please make sure you share the show. A little support, whatever you can do, goes a long way. And now back to the program. I got to ask you this because you get it better than all of us do in terms of the strategy and the technique. I feel like an unsung hero. Obviously, JDM's got a great team from Scrappy MMA. So I don't want to discount anyone there. And he worked with Alex Volkanovski, obviously, as well, which doesn't hurt a freestyle MMA. But Craig Jones, he's actually been a part of a number of camps. No one ever really talks about him. And if you ever ask Craig directly, he would never give himself any credit or say he's done anything. But he is sneakily becoming one of the sort of better kind of coaches, right? Like he's been a part of some key camps for a couple of key fighters, and we've seen some big improvements. You think people are sort of not kind of giving Craig enough maybe credit as a coach? Because obviously as a jiu-jitsu guy, he's one of the best.
Yeah, I think that's a very good spot, and I think there's a couple of different reasons why. Partly because, he plays the comedian and he kind of downplays his actual level of knowledge and ability. He's got a very kind of good self-depreciated humor, which kind of almost devalues his brand in some ways because he is a really, really good grappler. I mean, you can imagine if he was talking himself up and telling everybody how good he was, a lot of people would look at him very, very differently. But the reason why people like him is because he's not that person. And I also think that would probably change the way that he would approach coaching as well. Like if you're I'm not going to name anybody in particular, but if you're a really kind of confident, yeah, I'm the man, no one's better than me grappler, and you step into an MMA gym, you might have a bit of a swagger with you that's going to blind you in some ways to what the fighter that you're working with actually needs. You might think, no, what you need is a heel hook game. And in actuality, what you need is, a guard pass and a top body control position. It's interesting because I've noticed this with some coaches. Sometimes coaches like to teach you what you need, and other coaches like to teach you what they want you to do. And they're not always necessarily the same thing. And I think the humility that Craig Jones shows, just generally in his character, would also come across really well in the gym, because I think he would humbly offer his advice. And I also think he offers a bit of comic relief as well. I think people like having him around because he's a good energy. So I expect to see him popping up a bit more in people's corners.
I wanted to ask you this for a little while now. It's kind of like the perfect opportunity. Who do you think would do better at welterweight, Khabib or Islam?
I think Islam. I mean, I didn't see them together a great deal, but when they were both fighting, competing at lightweight, Makhachev just looked physically slightly bigger. He's got a slightly bigger frame, I would say. So I would say he's probably going to make the transition up to welterweight better. And I also think that, Makhachev's striking took a real leap forward when he suffered that knockout loss. And I just think that he's overall a better, all-round mixed martial artist. He's got tidier technique, certainly in the striking realms. And I think physically he's a bit bigger to make that transition. But again, I would love to see him standing next to Della when they're both in decent shape, and really see what he looks like as a welterweight.
Yeah, I noticed that Jack was actually quite big when he fought Belal, who's actually not a small, like he's not a tiny welterweight. Like they looked like there were two different weight classes when you looked at them side by side. It's going to be fascinating to see how this one plays out. This is the other interesting thing, right? So now it's going to be Ilia and Charles Oliveira at UFC 317. Hey, by the way, first off, do you think that Topuria beats, do you think that's a lock that Topuria beats Charles Oliveira here?
I mean, I don't think it's a lot. Anybody beats Charles. I think he's got the skills to catch anybody, but I also think he's very hot and cold. You know, you can catch him with a shot, and he can change his mind about being in there sometimes. I do think that Toporia's got the presence and the sub defense and the, you know, certainly the power in his hands to be able to really hurt Oliveira. It's a different fight to Makhachev, absolutely, because Oliveira will take a lot of risks. He leaves himself out to get hit, and I you know, I feel like Toporia's power is going to transition up, but at the same time, you know, it's going to be the endurance of Topuria that's going to overcome Charles Oliveira, because you're going to have a bumpy road for the first couple of minutes until everything settles down, and whether Topuria puts him away or takes him into the second round, he's going to need to go through a bit of a ringer. I would say, you know, defensive submissions, take a few shots. He might get a bit bloodied, get his nose bust a bit, because Oliveira's long and bony and chaotic, you know. But at the same time, I do feel like Toporia's got the skills and the maturity in his game to certainly kind of smother everything that Oliveira can do for the first couple of minutes and get past it.
It's a fascinating time because there's so many contenders in both divisions. So if you're like a contender that's not getting the next shot, you're a bit bummed out because it's like, hey, like we got these fun things, like Islam's coming to our division, but now he's going to fight JDM. And then Ilia's going to fight Charles. But then after that, right? I mean, the no-brainer is they still fight each other at lightweight. That way you get that big lightweight fight too. What do you do with the contenders, especially like a welterweight? Like you mentioned, Ian Gary. Do you just put him up against like Leon Edwards? Do you get Sean Brady back in the mix somehow? Do you get what do you do with Shavkat? Do you just hope that he recovers in time that when this all blows over? What would you sort of do with some of these contenders in the division who are waiting around for title shots?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are opportunities for people to, you know, to kind of force themselves into the picture. You know, like him or not, I do think what Ian Gary was doing with the M&Ms and kind of, you know, pushing his way into the, you know, into the picture at 315 was a smart thing to do, because he was the next welterweight there. You know, there was nobody else that anyone was thinking about, regardless of rankings.
Did you see what JDM said when they asked him about?
I did. That was brutal, though, wasn't it?
Was that cold-blooded or what? Was that cold-blooded or what?
I mean, it was. It
was like brutal. This. It was like ready to go. Like a gun.
Yeah.
It
was very quick. That was good banter. That was good banter for sure. Yeah, I mean that in itself is an odd circumstance. I don't know whether Ian Gary is ready to you know, step up, especially after that last round of his last fight. You know, he really looked out of sorts. And you've got to think that someone with the power of Della Maddalena, if he hurts him, you know, it's going to be difficult for Ian Gary to get away from him. But at the same time, you know, it might be an opportunity for Ian Gary to get another win, to, you know, to kind of refresh people's memory, because, you know, going from that last round into a title shot, I don't think is a good look anyway. It doesn't give people a lot of excitement that he's going to be enough for the champion. And, you know, there's people still floating around, you know, the likes of Colby Covington, like, get him back in the mix. He always makes a lot of noise. He's probably got 1 or 2 fights left, and, you know, let's let him aggravate someone and make something interesting and pass the time.
It's fascinating, so because you got Buckley and Usman. Like, let's say Buckley takes out Usman, that's going to be interesting. Then you got, you know, if Usman comes back, that's going to be interesting. So it's jam-packed. And even at lightweight, we got Paddy, we got Armin, and we got, you know, Dan Hooker, we got Justin Gaethje. It's like, it's a crazy time, because before Islam Makhachev had like no one to fight. Like, he didn't even know who to fight. And now there's like a billion people in both divisions. If Islam goes up to welterweight and wins that second belt, what do you think that does for him in terms of his legacy? Surely that just puts him on the Mount Rushmore, right, of MMA?
I mean, it does for me. He's pound for pound best right now, anyway, in my mind. It would be very, very impressive. You know, he is the kind of fighter that can definitely make that transition. And honestly, I do feel like the welterweight division is open right now for someone to come in and cause an upset. There's been times in the past where it would have been harder for someone to come up from another weight class and do that, but now seems like it's primed. It's a little bit unsettled. The belt's kind of moving around a bit, and the other thing as well, and this kind of you can see this in the Shevchenko fight. The more time a fighter spends as the champion, the more embedded they become, and the more difficult it is to unseat them. So getting Della Maddalena in his first title defense is probably the best thing for Makhachev to do, because the pressure of defending a belt would be really real in that instance. But I mean, for me, it's pound for pound best already. I always think moving up a weight class or even down a weight class and having some notable wins, impressive wins, really does solidify yourself as a well-rounded martial artist, because it shows your adaptability as well. And that's why a two-weight champion for me will always rank higher than someone that was a one-weight champion.
Mm. Yeah, and I selfishly, man, if Islam does become champion, imagine like an Islam Shavkat fight. Imagine like some of these fights are welterweight, some of these juicy fights, but then back at lightweight, we still got Pimblet. Like there's so many great fights for him that we can make. Just quickly before we wrap up, man, I just want to bring up Jose Aldo. He retired again in the octagon, but when he came back to the UFC, and I kind of feel like this, and I just want to get your thoughts. It's like you've got a legend who's come back, and now we're putting him in stupid fight after stupid fight, and in stupid situation after stupid situation. Obviously, the fight that he was fighting, UFC 315, got changed to featherweight because he couldn't even cut the weight. But it's like, why is he even fighting in that weight class? So he has the conversations with him to say, hey, man, you're a legend. Why don't we have some fun fights? And in a time where we've got the pit bulls around, or like Dominic Cruz was going to retire, why do we not utilize Jose Aldo in moments where he can thrive and create more memories, rather than putting him up against Zahabi in a fight that absolutely makes no sense at UFC 315, another aging fighter? And full credit to Zahabi, he was able to battle back and win that one. But Jose Aldo got exhausted towards the end because obviously he was trying to cut weight to a weight class he should have never been in the first place. And the guy was talking about wanting to get a title shot. Man, he was nowhere near a title shot. So now he retires again when we could have had him potentially around for a little bit longer, having fun fights in a situation where the UFC really did not utilize him well at all. What's your reaction to this last run, this strange last run that he had in the UFC, and the fact that the UFC really did him no favors here?
I mean, it's unfortunate and frustrating. We talked about this, I think, in reference to the PFL before, where I would like to bring in a Masters division, and for the exact reason that once you move into the Masters division, you're fighting people that are on an equal level, and you're no longer in the Shark Tank with all the ones that are swimming around for the world title, the ones that they're elite in their peak. And I always think it's a shame when, it's just the UFC model, isn't it? It's ruthless. The bigger the name you are, the better the meal you are for the next prospect coming through. And if we can feed you to the next guy, then amazing. We can use you as as the catalyst for stardom for the next brand. You saw them do it with Ken Shamrock, with Tito Ortiz. They even brought Ken Shamrock back, and he threw himself on the floor against Rich Franklin, if you remember that, because Franklin was going for the middleweight belt, and not many people knew who he was. It's a weird thing, but it's also quite sad to see. We see the same thing with Jim Miller. That was not enjoyable for me to watch. They tried to do the same thing with Nate Diaz, of course, with Chimaev. It's the unfortunate nature of the sport, and fighters like Tony Ferguson and Cowboy, fighters like that if they, you look at the fighters that Cowboy got towards the end of his career. Conor McGregor was a good fight for him, made a bunch of cash there, but Darren Till was just too big and too powerful for him, and Leon Edwards was too sharp for him. There were a lot of fights that he took that it was more about Cowboy being in there to lift the other person up, so they were more valuable to the UFC. Overall, I think it's a sad way of doing things, because you always see your favorite fighters going out in a kind of sad, and even like Anthony Smith. He probably should have retired a couple of fights ago, really, because he probably took a bit more damage than he needed to at the end of his career. But same thing, they're always going to feed you to the next guy and utilize your name best they can. It's the machine, it's the sport, and we have to unfortunately just kind of suck it up and get on with it.
Yeah, it was just a shame to see Jose Aldo sitting on the ground in that manner after everything he's done for the sport. It's just like, and by the way, Zahabi's 37. It's like, I get it. Like if it was like a young guy that's coming up, anyway, it was a shame to see, but all the best to him, dude. As we wrap up, we've got some big BFLs in June, right? I think Nashville, is that the next one? Is that June 11th? Break it down for us. What's coming up? How can we tune in? An Australian around the place. I know the only thing is people like, oh, whoa, Paul Hughes is fighting. There were a lot of people that didn't quite realize the fight was happening until it was just starting. I think that because there was so much happening this weekend, and obviously the NBA and all that stuff is on as well.
Yeah. It's funny when I'm on the broadcast, I often open my social media and just kind of see what people are saying. And often the comment is, oh, I didn't know this was happening. Oh, I wasn't aware this was happening. Like if you follow PFL on Instagram.
Yeah. Everyone just needs to follow PFL. That fixes all problems, right? Yeah.
That's it. I mean, I share stuff all the time. So if you follow me, I'm always sharing PFL stuff in my stories and on my posts. But yeah, follow PFL MMA, follow PFL Europe, and you'll get all of the updates. We've got some really big fights coming up. The June is semifinals month. So we've got Nashville, Wichita, and then Chicago. And we've got some awesome fights. I mean, Thad Jean against Jason Jackson's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see that one. We've got Dalton Roster, who's another one people have got to watch out for. He's a superstar in the making. He's rematching Aaron Jeffrey, who's the only person that's beaten him. That's going to be a really good one as well. And we've got some interesting prospects on the card. I mean, we've got a Scottish Twister again from Jake Hadley. That's 3 in the PFL now. I love a new submission. It's pretty cool. So that will be June. I think June 12th is the first one. You'll have to forgive my memory. I'm very, very tired. June 12th, and then we've got about a week in between. But again, follow PFL MMA on Instagram, and they're all the information's on there.
Awesome. Have you watched Thunderbolts yet, by the way?
No, I haven't. What's that?
It's the new Avengers movie. It's the new Marvel Avengers movie.
Oh, is it?
I just got done watching it. Yesterday. Very good. I know you like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
I want to hear your review next time you come on the show. But for now, go have a break, my friend. Congratulations on an amazing run. I can't wait to see the next run of shows that's coming up in June. And congratulations on all the success, man. Thanks so much for joining me here on the program.
No worries, mate. Thank you. Always good talking to you. I'll speak to you next time.